Marquee.
Alright, the squad, I hope you enjoyed Week of the Hawk. That thing was exhausting, but we're back on normal schedule now. Today's yet another video where I hope I haven't bitten off more than I can chew. This video is happening because of Paul, who won a YouTube comments vote. And what does he win? A punch to the gut and a bird dance, and today's video also. Which is, was the WWF light heavyweight division any good? We'll be looking at the matches, storylines and star power of the division to help us decide. There's no need to hide. A lot has been said about how WCW actually had them beat on this one subject. Their high flyers were known as the Cruiserweight division, and the popularity of that division made the WWF want a slice of the pie. Lots of WCW Cruiserweights went on to be real stars in the industry. Rey Mysterio, Eddie Guerrero, Chavo Guerrero, Chris Jericho and X-Pac all spent time in the division, but went on to be big names in wrestling. That division was memorable and it was making stars. The WCW kicked the WWF's ass in this department, so we need to find out if that narrative is true today. The beginnings of the actual light heavyweight title are a bit confusing. It can be traced back to 1981. It was called the WWF light heavyweight title, but the matches were actually not on WWF programming. The belt was in UWA Mexico and Michinoku Pro in Japan. WWF had a working relationship with these guys. Cruiserweight started turning up in the WWF in early 1997 when the WWF would randomly book AAA wrestlers on their show. Most notably at Royal Rumble 1997 when Mexican wrestlers were all over the place. There was no reason for them to be here and the fans just didn't care because they didn't know who they were. And it's not without talent, I'm not saying that at all. The problem here was there was no division and no established characters on the show. Throughout the year, the WWF also featured the Minis on quite a few occasions. Again, they were just randomly dumped onto the show for no reason, and fans mostly used these matches for piss breaks. It all just felt like a really half-assed attempt to combat the WCW. More like temp-fast. WWF did have some wrestlers actually signed that wrestled a high-flying style. Trailblazers were Flash Funk, Scott Taylor aka Too Hotty, and Brian Christopher Grandmaster Sexay. But they were in no way a division, they were just having random matches against bigger wrestlers. Well, actually, rewind just a little bit. Just a couple of months before the WWF activated the title. It's fine, it's going to be relevant. At WWF In Your House 16 Canadian Stampede, Taka Michinoku and the Great Sasuke would have a random match that would almost have been a show stealer if it wasn't for the main event. Vince described it as a light heavyweight division match during Taka's entrance, so I guess this is actually the start of the division. The match was really, really good, and Taka would go on to win it. So a great start. But the point here is that it had seemed WCW had all the best high flyers contracted, and along came Taka Michinoku. Someone that WWF realised they could potentially build the division around, and they did for a while. Little known fact, but on the following episode of Raw, the two actually had a rematch. This match was also used to establish that Brian Christopher would be a part of the division, God help us. More great athletic moves in this match that the WWF crowd wouldn't have been used to seeing, and surprisingly the Great Sasuke comes out victorious. Taka was the student of Sasuke, and it's heavily rumoured that Sasuke was supposed to get Taka's spot in the WWF, but he was notoriously hard to work with and he thought he was a bigger star than reality. He just wasn't a big star in the United States. He had made demands that he win the light heavyweight title but only defend it in Japan, so the WWF scrapped plans and went with Taka instead. It's pretty quickly established that there's going to be a weight limit on the division too. It's set at £215. Matches just start randomly happening with Taka winning most of them. The crowd sit in silence for any match that isn't featuring Taka. The issue is that all the wrestlers were already in the WWF before this so-called division began, and they just don't feel like they belong shoved in this division. To some of these guys, a cruiserweight match is just a normal match with the occasional dropkick thrown out. It doesn't help as well that I'm subconsciously comparing these matches to Taka's matches, so you forget the division exists until Taka Michinoku turns up. To call this a division at this point is an insult to any division that's ever existed. It's pretty much just Taka and Brian Christopher with other wrestlers coming in for an odd appearance or two. We get to see Tajiri twice and Jerry Lynn before their ECW fame. The matches are good, but they're short and without storylines. They're happening for completely no reason. They wheel out Sonny before every single light heavyweight title match to try and make people care. Scott Putski was also considered to somehow be part of this division. Despite looking like he was chiselled out of stone, I'm not sure how this guy would be under £215, and he certainly doesn't wrestle a high-flying style. He gets injured anyway, which puts an end to him in this division. So it sounds like a case of them trying to force square pegs into round holes. By September, Taka was really hitting his stride and looking more confident in the ring. We also got to see Pantera, who I have to say I really wish we'd have got more of in the WWF. He is the Panther. An incredibly enjoyable match in the early days of the division is Pantera and Taka michinoku. Scott Taylor was soon established as being part of the division, and I guess after 4 months the WWF thought it was time to get serious. A tournament was created to crown the first WWF Light Heavyweight Champion, and this would be 1 Light Heavyweight match per Raw, but at least it was on Raw and not a C show. So this at least shows the WWF care a bit. But then the credit immediately gets taken away because for nearly all the matches, the WWF made the bizarre decision to have Brian Christopher and his daddy Lawler on commentary. And they spend the entire matches laughing at the wrestlers and mispronouncing their names. Some of the jokes are kind of funny in a 90s kind of way, but Jerry's kid can be really irritating and distracting from the match. The match that gets us started in this tournament was Super Crazy, who's going as Super Loco, and he takes on Aguilar, who was S.A. Rios under a mask. This match is pure insanity for 97 standards. You ain't seen arm drags like this anywhere else. But because they're being so crazy, it also has some botches in it. I'm going to look past it though, because you quickly forget about a botch when it's followed by moves like this. Aguilar wins the match with a splash turning in midair. Really enjoyable. The second match was strangely Taka Michinoku versus a blonde-haired crowbar from WCW. Now I'm promising you, I am not making this up. Brian Christopher on commentary says that Devon Storm looks like Jeff Jarrett's younger brother, except with a big old beak on his face. Devon Storm is half a hawk and half a slapnut. Your worst nightmares. Anyway, this was only going one way after Crowbar misses his moonsault. Taka with a nice top rope spin kick, and Christopher tries to get involved, but Taka takes him out too. And the Michinoku driver wins it. As the tournament progresses, you can just tell there's only 2 wrestlers that the WWF actually care about here. Take Scott Taylor versus Eric Shelley. This match has no commentary because instead, a wild slapnuts appears on the phone.
Jeff Jarrett.
They were just teasing us in that last match where Brian Christopher was talking about him, but in this one his voice plays out for the entire match on the phone. He is making his debut next week according to him. The crowd are incredibly bored with this match, so was I. I think the problem is neither of these guys can do the insane moves that we had in the previous match. Taylor eventually wins with a diving DDT. The final first round match is Flash Flanagan, who looks like Jeremy Borash with muscles. In fact, I'm not sure how he made the 220 pound weight limit, and he takes on the wacky Brian Lawler, the only man other than Taka that they care about. Flash misses his flip dive straight away. Lawler cripples him with a sunset flip powerbomb out of the ring. Christopher wins the least competitive match so far with the Alabama Jam. Into the semi-finals we go to crown the first light heavyweight champion. Aguilar versus Taka Michinoku is a dream match for me. I had high hopes for it. And I'm not just talking about their dives. I have never seen a wrestler front flip out the ring and land on their feet, but he doesn't stay on his feet long because Taka dives on him. Another highlight of this match is Taka throwing Aguilar at the ring pole, who promptly climbs up it to hit a corkscrew moonsault to the outside. Taka misses his own high risk move in the ring. Moments later he hits the missile dropkick and the Michinoku driver, completely against the run of play. I was actually slightly disappointed by this match. I thought it would go further. Not saying it's good or bad. The Scott Taylor versus Christopher match doesn't even happen because Kane kills him. On to the final then, which takes place at D-Generation X in your house. Taka versus Brian Christopher. At least it's a clear face versus heel matchup, and Christopher's been making fun of Taka on commentary for weeks now, so it kind of makes sense. And this does turn out to be the best match of the tournament. It's not balls to the wall like some of the earlier matches, but it's wrestled smoother and it has a much better story. Lawler's in control for most of it until he misses the Alabama Jam and the driver finishes it off for Taka. Good. And after the match we get to see the light heavyweight title for the first time. A big deal is made out of it as the Japanese press squirt in their nappies with happiness. Probably a match of this pay-per-view too. This win pretty much starts a feud with Taka and Jerry Lawler, which would last Taka's entire stay with the WWF. This is all because Jerry Lawler didn't like his son losing, so Lawler would constantly make fun of him on commentary for years. And now he's the champion. Taka's first feud was with Lawler. Jerry, that is. So it's not a light heavyweight feud for the champion, and the division disappears at this point. Taka wasn't even on the Royal Rumble show, instead they had the Minis wrestle again. Why? And despite Taka missing the Rumble, he was still on TV, but not in light heavyweight matches. It's not a knock on Taka, I love the guy, he's still bringing it in all his matches, but it's supposed to be a light heavyweight division, not the Taka Michinoku division. In February, Pantera returns, which gave me something to be happy about. And we're treated to a title match between Taka and Pantera. But Sonny is still coming out before all the light heavyweight title matches because they're worthless without some blonde booty. Taka doesn't even have a booty. And if that wasn't enough, guess who's on commentary again? At this point I feel like they're trolling us. The match is great, it's potentially the best one so far, and it's over 10 minutes. It may even be a sleeper match, but let me tell you brother, there's a reason people don't talk about this match. I had to listen to things on commentary such as Tako Michinoku, Slant Eye, the Japanese people are spineless. Ugh, you get the idea. Why are all these matches made to look like a joke in one way or another? And why the fuck is Brian Lawler still feuding with Taka without having a proper match to settle this feud? At this point the title has been defended 3 times in 5 months on the main shows. And a match with Taka defending the belt against Dick to Go isn't going to help, no matter how low-key talent of a dick he was. This was the beginnings of Taka feuding with Kaientai. He also defended the title against future tag team mate Funaki. Neither of these matches were long or a big deal. Taka obviously was trying his best to get some big dives in for his short time in the matches. In fact, Taka was so bored of his lack of challengers that he formed a short-lived tag team with the ridiculous-looking Bradshaw. They even went after the tag belts, but they were unsuccessful. By August, something finally happened as Taka turned heel. Unfortunately, Taka got involved in the infamous feud between Val Venus and Kaientai. You know, choppy your pee-pee. Yeah, Taka was light heavyweight champion during this whole thing, but I'd forgive you for forgetting that. It's not as if it's an important detail at all. Taka turned heel on Val Venus and he joined Kaientai. This was explained as happening because Val Venus was turning Taka's sister into an adult movie star. Well, at least it's going to be something new for Taka because, nah, forget it. As a heel, Taka was now a comedy heel, and he lost all of his matches. At this point, the light heavyweight title had not been defended for 3 months, and believe it or not, that's also counting C-shows. I have no idea why they even thought it was worth bothering with at this point. It's clearly worthless. Coming up to the year anniversary of the title, they remembered it existed. Taka defended the title against Christopher Daniels in yet another random match that was happening for no reason. At Judgment Day 1998, for completely no reason at all, Christian challenged for Taka's light heavyweight title. It was the first time the title had been defended on pay-per-view since WrestleMania, 7 months before. It's just an average match because Taka's a heel and Christian is making his debut under this goth character. I never recall seeing Christian powerbomb anyone like this though throughout his career. Christian turns the Michinoku driver into a pin and that's the 3. Christian didn't even look happy to win the belt, and I don't blame him. Yeah, I know it's his character, shut up or I'll smack you one. Look, this title change needed to happen, let's see if anyone else can breathe some fresh air into the division. I was soon disappointed. Yes, the title is defended now, but it was defended on C-shows only and it wasn't treated like it was important. The matches were all short. Christian beat Dick to Go. I was shocked Christian was able to kick out of a frog splash by a guy with such a large belly. He also defended against Brian Christopher and Taka Michinoku. This division is not comparable with the WCW division at all. This is probably a good time for me to talk about the Super Astros show. This was a separate show that ran for a while which was made for Spanish audiences. This show actually did feature international talent, but it was separate to the light heavyweight division. In fact, the light heavyweight title didn't even feature on that show. So they were all fighting for no reason, and due to this I don't factor this as part of the light heavyweight division. After about 28 shows, it was finished, and most people don't even realise it existed. Back to the actual light heavyweight division. After a few short weeks, the title was being defended on Raw. It was Christian against Dwayne Gill, a bold skinny man who couldn't look like any more of a jobber if he tried. He was described as a joke the entire match and Christian kept toying with him. The appropriately named Job Squad rushed the ring and took apart the Brood with Scorpio hitting a flying something on Christian. The camera barely caught it and this gave Dwayne Gill the light heavyweight title. And as funny as this man actually is, it's not good for the belt. Come on, nothing good can possibly come from this. Well, it's the highest point of Dwayne Gill's career. He got the most TV time he'd ever had. Christian had a rematch. He didn't win it. Taka Michinoku had a shot too. A man who was literally flying high a year earlier. But no, he's worthless now. So this title isn't exactly building stars, it's more like making them look stupid. All the defences came whilst he was just a bold, skinny, aging jobber called Dwayne Gill. And they described his title reign as a fairy tale story. But that was soon to change. He became Gillberg, a gimmick designed to poke fun at Goldberg in the WCW, and he put his all into this, to be fair, it was great. But that credit then gets taken away because the light heavyweight title just became a prop. It wasn't defended at all. Not on C-shows, not on nothing. It was barely even acknowledged anymore. The plan was originally to have Gillberg match Goldberg's winning streak, but instead it'd be a losing streak. So it's not looking good for this title. The losing streak gimmick never really happened. The highlight of Gillberg's time was challenging Triple H for his world title. He only lasted less than 2 minutes. It finally all came to an end in February 2000, on Heat, because nothing important involving the light heavyweight title could ever happen on a main show. Gilbert came out to cut a promo revealing that he has been the light heavyweight champion for fucking 15 months. Yes, you heard me right. S.A. Rios ran out with Lita and beat him in about 30 seconds of a moonsault. Praise the Lord, it's over. 3 title defences in 15 months with not a single one on the main show. And at this point I have to say it's the most clear-cut was it any good I've ever done. But S.A. Rios is my favourite cruiserweight of all time, so a man of his talents could bring some prestige to the belt. Who am I kidding? Well, he does defend the title on Raw the next week, which is more than any wrestler has done since Christian lost the belt to Dwayne Gill. And before that, it was Judgment Day 1998. I never realised how bad this was, because it's low-key bird turd, it just went under the radar. Anyway, let's see what S.A. can do. First title defence is against Crash Holly on Raw. I really want to like this, but I just can't. The only time it felt anything close to the WCW division was right at the start when they held the tournament to crown the first champion. Since then, the matches have gotten shorter and shorter, and Rios is the only international talent that they're using. On the plus side, the title is defended on the next 2 episodes of SmackDown. I'll take any improvement at this point. One defence is against Jeff Hardy. It's so weird seeing Lita attacking the Hardys, but she was of course aligned with S.A. Rios in the early days. The ref eventually sees her interfering and throws the match out. The second match is against Christian. Please God, don't let him have the title again, it was terrible. No, it gets thrown out again. What a dominant champion we have here. It gets interesting on the next Raw though, because S.A. Rios will be defending the belt against Dean Malenko, a man who is known for being a big part of the WCW Cruiserweight division, and for having little man syndrome too. Maybe he could show us what this missing ingredient is. Well, Dean is going to have that chance because he beats S.A. Rios. I've said it before and I've said it again. What a terrible champion. Now when you think of the light heavyweight title, what is the first feud that comes to mind? Well, for anyone who's played SmackDown 2 as a kid, that feud would be Scotty 2 Hotty versus Dean Malenko. In story mode, these two had match after match after match, trading the title and no one else could even get in the picture. Little did I know this was actually one of the few accurate things in that story mode. And I will say that the matches are decent, at least they make the main show for the most part. But nearly all Dean Malenko's matches are won due to Eddie Guerrero interfering. It's early days, there's no need to use verbal sprays. After knocking off Taka Michinoku on Raw, the King called Dean probably the best light heavyweight champion we've ever had. A week later on Raw, he lost the belt to Scotty 2 Hotty. You can't make it up. And you know, normally I'd think about dumping on this, but Scotty is at the peak of his popularity here. And with Grandmaster Sexy on the injury list, I guess it makes sense. Anyway, props to Dean, he only held the belt for just over a month, but he did defend it 3 times on Raw and SmackDown, and extra times on C shows. So the title is gaining some importance. Scotty made his first defence on Heat in a triple threat with guess who? Yeah, that's right, the entire Cruiserweight division minus S.A. Rios. And it's a really good fun match, as you would expect with these 3 guys. Then, just 10 days later on SmackDown, Dean Malenko beat Scotty for the title. Well, what was the point in that? Someone please tell me, I'm completely lost for words. Did they feel sorry for him or something? And the match went 3 minutes. We kicked Dean's second reign off with actually the best light heavyweight match in about 2 years. And it's on pay-per-view, the first time since Judgment Day 1998 that that's happened. Did anyone else realise this belt was as turd as this? But we do get a small moment of hope because Dean vs Scotty at Backlash is actually good. It gets a nice amount of time dedicated to it, over 10 minutes. This match shows you what could have been with this division. As you can tell, I've written it off at this point. The finish was a DDT from the top rope from Malenko. After the match, Scotty was pulled aside by Linda McMahon, who told him not to ever let that move happen again, it was too dangerous. And I think that's quite telling. The WCW division was balls to the wall, but in WWF they were obviously being monitored closely with their moves and they were under stricter controls. I would call it a day there, but we can't, because Dean Malenko now goes on to hold the light heavyweight belt for almost an entire year. And during that time, guess how many times the belt was defended on pay-per-view? That answer is 0. You f***s. Why? They had a great match at Backlash and you follow that up with nothing. And it's not like Dean isn't wrestling. He was wrestling something like twice a week. But he was more interested in chasing after other titles because he knew the light heavyweight title wasn't worth anything. The light heavyweight title was relegated to just being on Heat and Jacked. Most of his opponents were Scotty 2 Hotty, S.A. Rios or Crash Holly, because they just don't have the guys to be doing this. All the matches are all the same, no risks are taken. The wrestlers barely even run anymore. The only time it's different is when the WWF decides to have him defend against completely random people. Why did just Joey Legend have a shot at the light heavyweight title? The guy's at least 6'3". Eventually even Dean Malenko got sick of this. He tries being a fighting champion, but it just wasn't doing anything to help him. The title disappeared. In fact, it wasn't defended on the main show for 5 months, and when it was just Dean Malenko defending against women. Very telling how low they thought about this title. Dean's run finally ended to Crash Holly over on Heat. It was just a typical light heavyweight match, but Dean did what he could with the belt, and it wasn't getting any better. Dean didn't have the wrestlers to work with that he had in WCW, so Crash Holly ends Dean's reign at 357 days. Well, at least Crash is very popular with the crowds. What am I even talking about? I said the same thing about Scotty. Crash never defended the belt on the main show, and he dropped it to Jerry Lynn, who makes the girls grin after 47 days. Sadly, he doesn't make me grin, and his reign is short. He does actually manage to get a couple of title defences in on the main shows, but they're just 2-minute matches. It's so frustrating because all of these matches have good flow, but they end before they can even get good. They feel so rushed. After 38 days, he lost it to Jeff Hardy on an episode of SmackDown. It was frustrating because Lynn was hardly given a chance to get into his groove. The only positive I have here is that Jeff Hardy is a more established WWF star than anyone else who's held the belt at this point. He's really popular and highly thought of, so that gives the light heavyweight belt a chance. Well, the title actually gets on pay-per-view at King of the Ring 2001. Of course, there's no storyline reason for the match to take place, but it's more than we've had for a long time. Jeff Hardy successfully defends the title against X-Pac. It's just an average match, but it's something. Then on the next episode of Raw, Jeff Hardy loses it to X-Pac. What was the point in that? This gave Jeff a massive reign of 17 days. No, wrong. Someone hit Vince with a brick. Pac defends the title on the next 2 episodes of Raw back to back. It's like a record. 3-minute matches happen, but for no reason. I pass. And the problems are worse now because X-Pac is at his most unbearable here. He's doing his failed faction X Factor with the fake Road Rash character Just Incredible and Albert, and I just want them to go away. Now this is where it gets interesting because the WCW invasion was taking place at this point. And some wrestlers who had helped make the WCW Cruiserweight division were now in the WWF. X-Pac, the light heavyweight champion, clashed with Billy Kidman, the WCW Cruiserweight champion. All the gold was on the line. It's a bit of a weird fit because X-Pac is a heel and we're supposed to cheer him because he's representing the WWF. It turns out to be my favourite light heavyweight title match in ages because it actually feels like there's stakes here. These two had great chemistry and X-Pac wins with the diving X-Factor. He is now a dual champion. X-Pac immediately complains to Regal about his lack of competition and Tajiri laughs at him saying X-Pac sucks. And as soon as that happens, they have a match that night. And Tajiri beats X-Pac for the light heavyweight title. Guess they thought having 2 belts was too much for X-Pac. Tajiri countered his diving X-Factor with the Mist, which was kinda cool. That ends X-Pac's reign at 41 days. So now we get another match with all the gold on the line. This one's at SummerSlam. You have to question why 2 guys who are both WWF guys are fighting, because we're right in the middle of the invasion storyline here. But aside from that, it feels like a big deal again. Shows how underrated X-Pac is that he could possibly make us care about this pile of bird turd. X-Pac wins the match and he's a double champion once again, giving Tajiri a 12-day title reign. I would call this bad, but I think X-Pac as a double champion is best for business at this point. Billy Kidman does manage to take the Cruiserweight title away from X-Pac shortly after, but the light heavyweight title, which we're interested in, is staying with X-Pac. Hindsight is a wonderful thing though, and they should have given both the belts to Kidman, because X-Pac has to take 3 months off to heal from injuries. The WWF had originally wanted to do a title unification match between these two at Survivor Series, which would have made sense. But that match can't happen. When X-Pac returns to TV, the belt wasn't mentioned. It's officially deactivated upon X-Pac's return from injury. I don't think the belt has ever been seen since 2001. Bizarrely, X-Pac is given a 201-day title reign despite being injured for the majority of that and only defended the light heavyweight belt once during that. So it's kind of a sham. The belt is abandoned and the WWF went with the Cruiserweight belt from WCW instead, which did have a much better history, it was better looking and it was less tarnished. So that's where the story ends for the light heavyweight title. It started off great, but it didn't take long at all for it to be obvious that the WWF wasn't investing in having a light heavyweight division. The majority of the matches happened away from the main shows, and you can count on 2 hands the number of pay-per-view matches. That's 3 of you from Merthyr Tydfil. The division never got near the WCW division. There was no insane action, hardly any international stars, and the whole thing was a waste of time. Lack of compelling matches, lack of compelling storylines, lack of talent, inconsistent booking, inconsistent title reigns, joke champions, and talented wrestlers wasted. This division sucks now and it sucks forever and it sucks Sonny Siaki's ass. Shove it in the zone because this thing was bad. Now it's over, I'm feeling glad. I'd be interested to know your thoughts on the division in the comments. And also, do you think wrestlers like Taka, Michinoku and S.A. Rios would have been better off in the WCW? And if you think Brian Christopher deserved the title, I'll knock you out without using Naito.